Hello, and welcome to tonight's episode of Threads of Fate. This is episode 4 of this series, 4 of 5, the penultimate episode. If you're watching this now, this is not the Links of Tartarus campaign. That campaign is on Mondays. This is Threads of Fate, the short-form interview series where we get you up to date with all the things going on Hands of Fate. We're trying to get you up to speed with everything that happened before the stream started so that you know who these characters are so that you can follow the campaign. Today, we are joined by Anna who plays Anura in the campaign. Anna, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm going. And that says something, at least.
That's real. Also, for those of you guys watching live right now on Thursday night, either right now or right after this, the Links of Tartarus episode that aired this past Monday will be live on YouTube. So if you missed that episode live and you're not subscribed to our Twitch channel, you can go ahead and watch episode 5 entitled Bodies. You can go watch that on YouTube right after this. Also, it was quite a doozy. Also, we are, I think, like 1 or 2 subscribers away from unlocking a new emote. So definitely help us get there. It'll be another of the members of the Hands of Fate. Maybe if we hit that milestone tonight, I'll say that the next emote will be the Anura emote. There you go. There's your inspiration. So, Anna, let's talk about Anura here. So, walk into a room. I see Anura. What am I looking at?
Alright, so I am the only non-demigod of the campaign. Let's put that out there to start with. So yeah. I play Anura, who is a purple tiefling, about 6 foot, a little bit over, really, really skinny, has horns across the top, purple hair, piercing blue eyes, usually wears like some sort of leather armor, fairly not well equipped with a bunch of weapons, but does have a shield. The big thing is on Anura's arm, there is a mark that's constantly moving around that looks like a constellation's across it. It's constantly moving around. That's like the big identifying mark that is Anura. I think that's the big things we talked about so far.
For sure. Clothing-wise?
It's usually going to be like that dark black leather armor that you see that you originally put in when you did the Hero Forge markups of everybody. That's what it tends to be.
Put that over the video right now. Continue.
Yeah, I think that's what Isaac tends to draw with Anura as well anyway. It fits really well for them.
Yeah, for sure. And Anura started the campaign with a black cloak, a magical cloak, but now that has been switched out for Nature's Mantle, which is another magic item that you have acquired. That is I think its standard form is like a green cloak, but it can shift. Also, speaking on...
Yeah, I don't think I have ever said, and we're never really wearing it.
Yeah. Speaking of the non-demigod nature of you, not only are you the only non-demigod, but tieflings are actually even rarer than demigods here in Greece, at least. In Gaia, tieflings are native to a different continent. So you've met one tiefling so far, the Mouth, the liaison of the Oracle, who is now dead, and who knows when you'll meet another tiefling. Cool. So, besides the constellation on Anura's arm, that is sort of the iconic identifier of Anura, your sort of go-to move in combat as a druid Circle of Stars is your starry form. So a lot of people may not know exactly what the Circle of Stars is all about, especially if they're used to the fairly standard druid subclasses. This might be a little different from what they're used to. So why don't you talk a bit about what the starry form is, what it looks like, what it allows you to do?
Yeah, so Circle of Stars was implemented I think a year ago, was when they came out with Links of Tartarus, somewhere in there. So it's a fairly new subclass in general, but the big thing that I do go to with it is the starry form. So it basically takes up one of my wild shapes, or the 2 that I have, I can use starry form instead. And there's 3 different ones. There is Archer, Chalice, and Dragon, and I tend to go to Archer, which is combat heavy, because a lot of our stuff has been combat heavy because we also have another healer. So what it basically is is how we've described it so far, is like the constellations on Anora's arm. Whenever they activate and go into a starry form, it goes over their whole body. And the way we've described it is like it's an avatar state kind of thing. Like their eyes start glowing, they become like a lot more powerful in that moment. And it's just one of those things that like it very much fits the character, I think, really well, that they have this powerful thing behind them considering a lot of what's happened.
For sure, yeah. I love it. I've never had a Circle of Stars in a campaign before. I've had an NPC that I made with Circle of Stars, but she didn't really use this aspect of the character as much. So this is a really interesting new flavor for me as a DM, which I love. But let's talk a bit about the fact that you are the only non-demigod in the campaign. When you were deciding what you wanted to play, what made you hesitant to choose a demigod? Or do you just want to do something different?
I think for a little bit of it, I mean, like, we didn't really talk as a party before we really made our members, because, like, at that point, I don't think any of us had really talked outside of, like, you'd put us in the server, we'd mentioned who we were, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was. I looked at Demigod, and I really, really, really thought about playing it, because, like, I was 110% that kid in middle school who read all the Percy Jackson books, was super into them. I remember in elementary school when they released, we read one of them in my math class for some reason. And we had like a day that we were all going to meet our teacher and go see it with her kids, and like I just didn't get to go. So like I really, really thought about it, but at the same time, just like me as a person, I'm always drawn with druids. I just really like the way the class plays in general, and it's a class I'm really, really comfortable with. And so I was thinking, like, you know, I really like druids, and as much as I like the idea of this demigod class, I feel like a lot of people are going to pick it. I feel like we should have something that's a little bit different. And then lo and behold, I was correct. Everyone but me picked it, including our former party member Lathos. So
yeah, rip Lathos. Yeah, I was actually really grateful that you didn't go the demigod route, because I mean, obviously the campaign is sort of built around the demigod race, so I was hoping some people would be demigods, but I think it's just a different sort of environment if every member of the party is a demigod as opposed to some or even most. I think it makes a far more interesting dynamic, especially from Anura's perspective, to be the only non-demigod. But that being said, even without the demigod race, you still have a relationship with a god. You are a devout follower of Artemis. Talk a bit, and again, we'll only talk about the stuff that's been revealed openly so far, but talk a bit about your relationship with Artemis. Anything we know about how it started, or what it sort of means to Anura?
Yeah, so the funny thing about it is the audience probably knows more than what the actual party is supposed to know. Like, as characters, the party knows less about Anura's past than what out of character they know that's been revealed through, like, the stuff that we just talked about outside of it so far. So basically the big thing that's been revealed so far that came in during the Battle of Delphi is that I play a character that was abandoned by their parents in the end, and we haven't gone into detail with what that is though. But basically the big thing that you can figure out from it is that there was something about me that led me to Artemis, and at this point the big thing that we've seen that shows what how my journey with Artemis has started was the Sisters of the Moon. And going through Artemis's forest, that's where the party actually met Anura, because I wasn't in the first session because of some outside problems. I didn't get to make the first session, so the party actually met Anura, and that's how everyone knows Anura as, was being with the Sisters of the Moon in Artemis's forest and being their path through.
Yeah, so let's touch on that a bit. So yeah, originally Anura was supposed to be at the beginning of the adventure. They were going to be in Looms when everyone met. They were going to be there from the very beginning, but you had a scheduling conflict for that very first session. And so with some quick adjustments, it made sense with your backstory and all that kind of stuff and who you are, to place you with the Sisters of the Moon instead, so that they could sort of pick you up by the second session. But it did create a sort of a different dynamic where it was, you know, the four boys at the beginning, and then eventually Lathos went away. But you were their first sort of, like, adopted child, basically. But I wonder, I don't actually know, but I wonder if the party members think that you were a Sister of the Moon, because you are not.
I don't know if they honestly know or not. I don't think
know.
that's never been a discussion. Like, I mean, outside of it, they all know. Like, the players know, but the characters don't, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like, the only one who probably would have asked me about it would have been Adagio during one of, like, the sleepover things. But I don't think we've ever had... I don't think that's been a conversation.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, we keep discovering as we do these interviews that there's so much about these characters that is so central to the character that the party just hasn't really discussed yet. For people who are, you know, starting that found family trend, there's not a lot of questions that have been asked about who these people are, which is exciting because that means that there's more stuff on the horizon. So now let's dive deep a bit into anything that's been revealed about Anura so far. I think it's fairly little, and we'll talk about the memory later. But without talking about that memory reveal, let's talk about what has been revealed to the audience and or to the party about Anura, who Anura was before they met.
Things that I think have been revealed so far. I'm not going to go into what I know hasn't been said on stream. Like, I'm not going to talk about what, like, the party knows that everybody else doesn't know yet, because y'all get to find out later.
Sure.
About all of Anura's tragic backstory.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest things that have been revealed that, like, I've talked about on stream before has been with the Sisters of the Moon. I found out about the Awakening, which is the big thing that sent Anura on this adventure so far. And so basically the Awakening is this ritual, this challenge that the Sisters of the Moon have, where you go and you visit different biomes basically throughout Gaia, and you collect gems at every one after you do, like, a certain thing or something like that, or you meet a certain person. And at the end, you come back to the Forest of Artemis, and there's an herb that you eat, and then you wait, and you basically get to talk to Artemis, and Artemis tells you what you're going to do with your life, basically. And that's the biggest thing, I think. That's really the only big thing that's been revealed about Anura besides the memory at this point on stream.
Yeah, I think that's right. And for context, the reason that we put this sort of gem quest in your... Oh, hello, cat.
That was adorable.
The reason that we sort of put this fetch quest in your backstory was a way to motivate and explain some of the druid class features. So obviously one of the biggest druid features is the ability to turn into animals, but an interesting restriction on that ability is that it has to be animals that you've seen before. And so there's always a question when you're starting a campaign of, like, well, have I seen this creature? Have I seen that creature? Blah, 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 blah. And so I put this little quest in to essentially mark off when you have access to certain animals. So you started the campaign with the gem from the forest environment, so you essentially have access to all forest animals now for your wild shapes. But you'd need to, do something in the Arctic to get Arctic animals and that sort of thing. So for every environment in D&D, so hills, grassland, forest, blah, 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 all that stuff, there's a list of animals that I have in a little document that once you get that gem, you would then have access to those animals.
And I remember when building the character, like, we talked about that specifically, like, how we were going to handle that, and you asked me if, like, I was cool with doing, like, a little quest, and that was, like, the best way we could find to do it, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's funny because I've almost half forgotten about it because Anura so rarely transforms into an actual animal.
The one time I did, I died, so...
Trauma now.
Yeah.
So, speaking of trauma, let's talk about the memory. So, once again, for anyone who's watching this who hasn't seen the previous episodes of Threads of Fate, just before the stream started, when the siege on Delphi was beginning, the very first thing that started that siege was a psychic attack from the Link of Mnemosyne. And what that did was it made everybody in Delphi relive momentarily some of their darkest traumas or their most traumatic memories. And I read all of these memories out to the party. So again, the actual characters have not discussed these publicly with each other, but all the actors know everyone else's stories. So let's talk about Anura's. objectively the most traumatic, I would say.
I think so.
Talk about what you experienced in that memory.
Okay, so the memory starts with Anura laying in the floor. I assume it's a basement. I don't think we ever really said exactly where it was.
Sure.
But locked in a basement, there's no windows, anything like that, and super hungry to the point like they're gonna die kind of thing. And then it goes, so you hear voices walking up to the door, and Anura hears these voices, and the voices ask them, "Are they dead yet?" And it's revealed that the voices are their parents, asking them if they're dead yet. And when Anura says no, their mom's only word is just pity. And then directly following that, a bug crawls under the door to feed Anura, and Anura has to eat the bug to survive. And at that point, that's when you get what Anora's feeling about this, and Anura is at the point of thinking, yes, it's a pity I'm not dead yet, because then I wouldn't have to be doing this to survive. I wouldn't have to be worried about what my parents think anymore.
Good shit.
Definitely a super traumatic. And it's not the only one, but it's the only one that's been revealed.
Yeah. Yeah, super great. I loved that moment, and again, I just sort of, when I was writing those sequences, I just went back to all you guys' backstories and was like, what single moment of this would be a really great memory for Nemosini to grab? And I forget like what exactly the description of that moment is in your backstory, but it's much less of a moment. It's more of just like a stage in your life. And I was like, let's expand on that. Let's make this really fucking awful.
You had a few options in that moment of my life to pick from, and that's the one you chose.
Yeah, that's real. And there was I think I actually wrote half of a draft of a different moment from that stage in your life, and I just thought this one was a little grosser and therefore better.
I can't remember who it was. I remember afterwards we were like, I think the party was talking about on break, I think, for that session, and I can't remember if it was Gavin or Isaac. One of them was like, that was gross. I don't remember which one it was, though.
Seeing everybody's faces as everyone's memory was being read, like, obviously the person whose memory it was like, oh shit, but everyone else in the party was like, what the fuck? Who is this person? I love that.
Yeah, because like we hadn't really talked about it at that point. Like I had never gone into detail, even with the party, about a lot of Anora's backstory, and I still haven't.
Yeah. It's one of those things of like the party hasn't actually asked each other anything about who they are. They're just here and they're on it together. So Nemosini did that, and then the entire siege happened, blah, 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 and ended up with you guys having the Link of Nemosini trapped in a blood glass cube, and then she sort of forged this connection with you. Now, this has all happened on stream, but since I have you here and we're talking about Nemosini, tell me a bit about how you, Anna, and you, Anura, are feeling about this connection you have with Nemosini, and specifically also the realization that she gave you that Anura might have some divine blood in her as well.
Yeah, so the way Anura looks at it, it's very much so as like a disdain thing, but also not out of the question. Because Anora's always just wanted answers. Like, there's never been any answers as to why this mark is there, because that mark is what caused that memory. Like, if it was not for that mark, Anura would not have been locked in that basement. And so a lot of trauma came from having this mark that marked me as a follower of Artemis and as something being different about me. And it was related to Artemis, and there's a whole big thing with that. So I think at this point, really, it's Anura looks at the connection with disdain, but curiosity, and it's a curiosity that they can't push away kind of thing. Me as a person, I absolutely love it, and it's great that this was picked against me because I am a sucker for a villain arc. No matter if it's going to have redemption or not, I'm a sucker for a villain arc. And it gets worse because one of my coworkers watches the stream, and anytime I walk into work, I just hear Anura villain arc at random.
I love that.
So, like, as a person, I love it. As a character, Anora's kind of, like, on the fence about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, like, I spent some time after the siege, but before you guys had really, like, talked much with Nemosini, spent some time thinking about who Nemosini would latch onto, given the opportunity. And obviously, like, you know, a Titan is never going to want to connect with a child of a god. So the natural target is sort of Anura. But then Anura also speaks Titanic, and and has such traumatic memories. Like, it's almost too tempting for it to go any other way for Mnemosyne, you know? So I was like, oh, this works real well.
And that's also, like, one of the ways I got the first big thing from my backstory that I don't know. Like, I didn't know about the Divine Blood, because, like, I gave you full control over what was going to happen with Anura from the beginning. I had no clue that was a thing. Like, my reaction on the stream that day was my genuine reaction to it.
Yeah, and so, speaking of, so the reason that Anura has this mark on their body at all, as well as the resistance to necrotic and all that kind of stuff, is because you wanted to figure out a way to adapt Nyxborn traits to Gaia. So again, for those people who don't know, who aren't like deep in the D&D world, Nyxborn is a sort of like racial augmentation that was introduced in the Theros book, where essentially in that setting, Nyx is sort of like the Olympus type situation, and it gives you certain factors of your physical being from the very start that sort of out you as different. And although, and I think the first question you asked was like, can I do Nyxborn in this setting? And my answer was like, kinda? Like, like, Nyxborn sort of is a less interesting version of my demigod stuff. So I was hesitant to just say, yeah, sure, well, I'll call it something else, but it'll be Nyxborn. But I did allow you to take those features, and I was like, let me just handle the explanation, please. And that's all you know.
That's all I know.
Yeah.
I have no clue.
Yeah. So, last couple of questions here. We've talked a bit about the your sort of long-term goal to go to every habitat, every biome, that sort of thing. But besides that, / including that, talk to me a bit about Anura's mental state now and where Anura currently sees themselves, like successful, past level 20, like all, like could happily rest. What would that Anura be doing? What would that Anura look like?
The problem is I don't know anymore.
That's fair.
I knew up until I knew what I wanted to have happen with Anura. Like, I knew how I wanted things to go until Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne has thrown a giant wrench into what that was gonna be. Because now there's stuff I know that I didn't know before, and it puts a little more curiosity for it. I think the only thing at this point that I can see being like a successful thing that I would consider success for Anura, and that Anura would probably consider success, is knowing who they are finally, like knowing everything, like knowing why they have divine blood, knowing why this mark is there, knowing why everything happened. I think that's the only thing I could see at this point being a happy, successful ending.
That's fair. I love that. I'm gonna give this to you, and you can veto this if you want. It'll be up to you if we discuss this or not, because there's a single scene that you and I had that the party was not privy to. That was before stream. It was when Anura was dead and had to be resurrected. Should we talk about that, or do you want to keep that close to the chest?
I have talked to the party about it some, for sure. I would be fine talking about some parts of it, but there is some of it that I don't want to put out there because I have to talk about my theories about Ilme then.
Sure, okay. So, go ahead, tell the audience what you're comfortable telling the audience about that moment.
So, to give you the backstory for it, we were trapped in a maze with a Minotaur, and I, as a character, could vaguely hear that Ryujin and Ilme were being attacked by the Minotaur, and me being the self-sacrificing person that I am, and having put that into my character, decided that climbing over the wall as a giant spider was the best thing to do, and I jumped out of the Minotaur, attacked the Minotaur, and was subsequently, on the next round for the Minotaur's turn, dropped to 0 hit points. And the Minotaur left me at that But I had some really, really, really unlucky rolls.
I think you
My
got a nat
first
1,
death
didn't
saving
you?
throw was a nat
Yeah.
1. That was my first nat 1. I think that was the first nat 1 of the campaign.
It very possibly could have been.
I think it was, unless there had
Yeah.
been one before me. And I think that was the first nat 1, and that was 2 of my death saving throws gone, and then I immediately failed the next one and died. And so they went through a whole bunch of other stuff after that. Like, the scene for that we're talking about specifically did not happen until after a bunch of other scenes. Like,
It was
the
the
party
next
got
session.
to talk to the Oracle. Yeah, the party got to talk to the Oracle. They went through the rest of the gauntlet, like the whole 9 yards. Like, I made a TikTok about it because I was so upset by it. Like, it absolutely gutted me because I put my heart and soul into my characters when I play them. And so then the next session, they lied to Archpriest Phaeton. Not really lied, but they kind of fabricated some stuff trying to get me back to life. Like, DJ said he was ready to lie his ass off to Phaeton just to get me back to life.
The party basically, because it's tradition for those who fall in the gauntlet to not be resurrected, to just be put to rest, because clearly they were sent on a test and they failed that test, so that's that. So they knew it was going to be a challenge to get anyone to resurrect you, but obviously they wanted to resurrect you because you're a party member. So the party basically, they reiterated to Phaeton how crucial what the Oracle had told you guys was, and heavily implied, without lying, that Anura was essential to the Oracle's plan. And that seemed to be what you needed to get Phaeton to agree to resurrect you.
And then we went through the resurrection ritual, which you do a lot like they do in Critical Role, where you actually get to have the party members talk and do things. And I can't even remember all exactly what happened. I know one of the things that I remember specifically was they laid the Minotaur hide on me. So now there is a patch of skin on Anora's abdomen, I think, that is rougher and thicker than the rest of the skin that came from the hide.
Yeah, I think they covered the initial scar that the Minotaur had left when I think the Minotaur stabbed you through the chest with its horn.
Yes.
Yeah, so they covered that mark with the Minotaur's hide.
Yes, and so they went through that, and then as soon as that was done and it got time to roll the final dice for it, you sent everyone else out, and it was just the two of us. And the only thing that I'm really willing to talk about from this, because I don't want to reveal the rest of it, because like it was one of those things like the party shouldn't know about it. The party wasn't there. They don't need to know what was there. Was when I was talking to the god that I'm not going to name.
Okay.
That was there. So basically I was talking to a god, and so there was these two things. There was one behind me that was pulling me towards it, which was where I could rest if I decided Anura wasn't coming back. And then there was where I could see the party and Phaeton going through the ritual. And there was a point where you asked me, did I think it was enough to bring Anura back with what they had done? And I remember saying I needed time to talk about it. And then the god started rambling on, and then I stopped and said, but what does my found family want? Which goes back to we very much so have made this party a found family. I asked, what did they want? Did they want me to really come back, or was this just out of obligation? And that was, I think, the final straw that made me decide that that was enough to bring Anura back.
Yeah. And to clarify for those who are unfamiliar with the Critical Role style of resurrection, basically it's a skill challenge, so the remaining alive party members and allies or whatever can attempt 3 different things to try to bring Anura back. So whether that's talking to Anura in the afterlife or pleading with a god or whatever, doing 3 different skill challenges, and if they succeed on those challenges, they lower the DC that Anura needs to hit, or that the DM needs to hit. But even if I succeed on the roll, which I did for Anura's case, it's still up to the player if the character comes back or not. So by the time the gods were asking Anura, the roll had already been successful. So it could have been real easy for Anna to just like shoot back down to Gaia. We're all set. But I loved that you really made it a decision. Even as much as you loved Anura, if it didn't feel right, then you would have just made a new character.
Yeah. Which
crazy.
sucks. Like, after that, I think that was the first time I was like, oh shit, I need to make a backup character.
Yeah.
Because, like, I had already grown really attached to Nora, and I mean, that was only 3 or 4 sessions in when I died. I had already grown really attached to Nora, and, like, I made a backup character, but, like, to this day, like, I think the best decision I made with Nora was to let Nora come back, because I think I would have hated the backup character just for taking Nora's place at that time point, at that time frame, I think.
Yeah, and, like, you know, how would I have the big bad for the end of the campaign if Anura didn't come back?
Oh, now I'm scared. Everyone keeps saying, like, we need Anura on our team, but Anura villain arc.
Listen, I didn't think of an Anura villain arc until you guys started saying Anura villain arc, and now I'm like... So, last question, and it's the dreaded question, which is, what do you think Anura views as their position in the group, if they're really aware of a position at all? It's sort of tough to say, but I mean, obviously you're closest to Adagio, but you are close to everyone. What do you think your position is?
So this ties back into a lot of why I couldn't decide originally if I wanted Anura to come back after dying. And something I don't know if I've voiced out loud before, but like very slightly, is that I feel like Anura is an outsider looking in a lot of the time. And like I mention it often with the fact that like they talk about being demigods, and then I'm like, except for me.
Yeah.
I feel like Anura is almost, I don't know how to put it without it sounding like a condescending way, besides an outsider looking in a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I think of them...
they're close to everyone, but...
Yeah, I think of them almost as, like, the grounding force, or the most human of them, because they all have these, like, lofty ideas about, you know, living up to their father's name, or, you know, all that kind of stuff, all this pressure that's been put on them since birth, just because of their divine birth. And here you are, an outsider, yes, a purple tiefling, weird, with a weird mark on your arm, weird, but as far as you are aware, not divine. So
except for apparently a little divine, blood.
But who knows? But you don't have that pressure that they have. They are, you know, I feel like most of them are on this mission to collect the Links of Tartarus because the Links of Tartarus being out there are a direct threat to their parent, to their world that their parents are responsible for. And then here you are with, I think, a different flavor of that drive, which I think is, you know, like every movie needs like the audience, like the person in the movie that is the audience's receptacle, is their stand-in. And I think Anura is probably the closest that this party has to that, to just like the everyman, even though you are a weird purple tiefling.
Yes, even though I am a weird purple tiefling.
Yeah. Last thing, do you feel like there's anything that is important about Anura to understand Anura that we haven't discussed yet?
I think it's something that we don't draw attention to, and I like that we don't draw attention to, but I think one of the big things that it is that Anura is non-binary. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not, a lot of attention isn't drawn to it, and that's a good thing, but it's also very important, because, like, it's not, I haven't revealed it yet, but, like, there's a point in the backstory where Anura is questioning that part of themselves because of Artemis. And it's one of those big things that, like, it's definitely big there, because, like, I corrected Mnemosyne, if I remember correctly. I had Anura correct Mnemosyne on using the wrong pronouns. So, like, I think that's one of those big things that, like, we don't call attention to it. And I like that we don't call attention to it, because I feel like it shouldn't have to be a big deal. But it's also a big deal because it's, like, representation for a lot of people who could be watching the stream, and it's also this big thing that almost caused Anura to fall off of the path of Artemis for a while.
For sure. Yeah, I was, again, very grateful when character creation was happening, and you mentioned that you wanted your character to be non-binary, because obviously I want to make this campaign open to all kinds of people, and I wanted to make the world open and accepting of all kinds of people, and so having a player be non-binary allowed me to really make sure that the world was structured in such a way that it worked really well. And it's good that you're also a follower of Artemis, who is sort of the patron saint of outsiders and of non-traditional sexualities and identifiers and all that kind of stuff. And because Artemis is one of the major goddesses of the pantheon, it's become so much more accepted in Gaia. You know, if someone is gay in Gaia, they're like, cool, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we had the opportunity in our campaign to draw attention to the fact that it's normal in Gaia, and try to make it feel more normal to those watching, because it just makes sense. Also, we didn't talk about Nyx, your cat, but you have a little cat named Nyx. Bought at the pet store while Adagio bought Reed the Raven. Just a little kitten that you keep with you.
Yeah, Nyx was a little up in the air as whether or not Nyx was just going to be a straight up cat or was actually going to be an additional feature from my druid subclass for a little while there.
Have we decided that? I mean, I think I left it up to you.
I don't think we ever decided that. I think that's still up in the air because I don't want to have to like be limited to having like 2 hours a day with Nyx.
Right. You let me know. All right. Well, thank you, Anna, for joining me. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you feel like you understand Anura a bit more now, and can root for them in Monday's episode. So we're going to wrap up here. Again, if you missed the beginning of this episode, the Links of Tartarus episode that aired this past Monday is now, or will be as soon as this ends, live on YouTube. You can watch that if you missed out. Also, we are super close to unlocking a new subscriber emote for Tier 1, which, we pre-record this, so I don't actually know if we've hit that record. But hey, if we hit, I think, 1 or 2 more subscribers while this was happening, then the next emote will be the Anura emote. If not, I don't know. It'll be someone else. But definitely tune in next Monday for episode 6 of the Links of Tartarus campaign, and next Thursday for the final episode of Threads of Fate, talking with Elizabeth, who plays Ilme, and then that'll be it. You'll be all caught up with what happened pre-stream. So thank you guys for joining us. See you next time. Anna, sign off.
Bye, guys.